Yeah. So, namaskar to all of you, and we're meeting after a long time. So, let's begin with this prayer from the Yoga Sikh Upanishad. This says Gama Gamastham Gamanadi Shunyam Chidrupa Deepam Timirandhanasat Pashyami Tam Sarvajanantarastham Namami Hansam Paramatma Rupam. Gama Gamastham. So here is an invocation to that the supreme reality, Paramatman, Parabrahman, whose nature is Gama Agamastha. It is moving yet unmoving. Gamanadi Shunyam. So moving and unmoving is the nature of, so he carries both. At the same time, Stha means he is in, he inhabits in both Gama and Agama, both Chara and Achara. All that is moving, all that is not moving, the innate and the conscious, in all he is stha. Gamanadi shunyam, yet he is free from all gamana and agamana. Neither he himself is moving, nor that he is not moving. Yet he inhabits in all that moves and all that does not move. And Chidrupa Deepam is that light of consciousness. He is he exists in everything and being in the form of the consciousness light, Chidrupa Deepam, Timirandhanasat, and destroys all darkness. Pashyami tam sarva janantarastham. The Rishi, in his deep contemplation, he says, Pashyami, I see him, I behold him directly. Sarva janantarastham. He being seated in the heart of everything that has manifest in this creation. Sarva jana antarastham. Namami hansam paramatma rupam. And I see him in the form of a hansa. Hansa is symbolically used for representing the pure soul, the pure, white, bright, colorless soul, Atman. So Paramatma Rupam, to that supreme self, I behold in every thing and being. Sarva Bhuta, Sarva Jana Antarastham. So Gama Gamastham, Gamanadi Shunyam, Chidrupa Deepam, Timirandhanasat, Pashyami Tam, Sarva Janantarastham, Namami Hansam, Paramatma Rupam. So maybe you all can repeat after me. I will say first. Gama gamastham gamanadi shunyam chidrupadipam timirandhanasat pashyami tam sarvajanantarastham namami hansam paramatma rupam. So listen to me once. गमागमस्थं गमनादिशून्यं चिद्रूपदीपं तिमिरान्धनाशात् पश्यामि तं सर्वजनान्तरस्थं नमामि हंसं परमात्मरूपम् Om. So, line by line, first I say Gamagamasthan Gamanadishunyam
गमागमस्थं गमनादिशून्यम्
Chidrupadipam Timirandhanashat
चिद्रूपदीपं
चिद्रूपदीपं
तिमिरान्धनाशात्
तिमिरान्धनाशात्
Pashyami tam sarvajanantarastham
पश्यामि
पश्यामि तं
तं सर्वजनान्तरस्थम्
सर्वजनान्तरस्थम्
Namami Hansam Paramatmarupam
नमामि हंसं
नमामि हंसं
परमात्मरूपम्
परमात्मरूपम्
Let's do it all together once. Om Gama Gamastham Gamanadishonyam Chidrupadipam Timirandanashat Pashyami tam sarvajanantarastham
नमामि
Namansam
हंसं परमात्मरूपम्
Paramatmarupam Om. So, Upanishads are great poetry, and whenever we recite or we read something of the Upanishads, we know how crisp, even with a little bit of knowledge of Sanskrit, one can have a little grasp of these verses because they're very, very simple. I read somewhere Aristotle said that if you cannot explain in a simple manner, it shows you have not understood. So it is with that deeper understanding that the seers and sages of the past have explained or have given expression to their realizations of the truth, some aspects of the truth, that it has captured in those small, compact lines the essence of the truth realized, the essence of the whole realization, and so much so that anyone with a little openness, open mind, with a sincerity in the aspiration, comes in contact with this these lines of the Upanishads, or any other writings of the seers and sages of the Vedic and Upanishadic period, one understands, one grasps. If doesn't understand fully, yet one has a feel that yes, there is something. There is something which keeps attracting again and again to fall in love with that. It gives us a conviction that yes, there is something which is very, very dear or near to us. That is why the call is very strong. That is why it is essential, it is also necessary for all of us who have chosen the path of spirituality or path of a different discipline than the ordinary people. We should read, we should contemplate, we should understand the Upanishads. And the Upanishads are many, and the very meaning of the Upanishads is that it is that aspect of the knowledge in which one finds by coming in contact with these writings. We call it for convenience writings, but they are not writings actually. So, in these texts, which we can call to some extent for convenience sacred texts, that there is that education, that knowledge which can help us immensely in our inner growth. And in those sacred texts, when we come in contact with that, we see, we feel that influx of the divine energy, that flow of the divine energy. It is charged with that divine vibration. And if truly one is sincere and then one is truly open, one can almost concretely feel this purity of the vibration in the Upanishadic and the Vedic mantras. That is how, for thousands and thousands of years, they have been captivating the ones who are approaching it with that sincerity. But when we approach these texts from our outer perception, from our using the outer instruments, say, for example, mind is our instrument through which we try to understand something, but mind itself is extremely limited. There is something beyond the mind, and the truth that has been revealed, or the aspects of the truth which have been revealed in these mantras, which has been revealed to the rishis or through the rishis, through the ones who were in deep contemplation in that higher plane of consciousness. So, mind has hardly any capacity to grasp even a little bit of it. Little bit of it in its true sense. It can grasp so many things, it can distort, it can interpret, it can go on writing thesis after thesis on this, but still to grasp a little bit of its essential force, one has to stop the mind somewhere, and there must be something else which has to take the role of getting into the whole spirit of the mantra. And as long as we are confined to the outer external consciousness, using the limited instruments and trying to find out till then, however intellectually we may be great, however great poet, intellectual author one may be, but still it is a limited knowledge. Even the Vedas, Upanishads, all the higher levels of texts, the profound spiritual texts as we know them available to us, even those texts also will remain limited as long as they are approached with the limited mind, with the limited consciousness. So, this is where I think the whole subject matter of the Mundaka Upanishad begins with. The Upanishad is short, yet it can take a long time to get into it, contemplate on the different aspects of it, and understand the spirit of it. Because it deals with the Brahma Vidya. As I said, that Brahma Vidya is the central content of all the Upanishads. This Brahma Vidya includes the self knowledge, it includes the God knowledge, it includes the world knowledge. All three have to be reconciled with the same intensity, with the same spirit. Then it becomes Brahma Vidya. And every Upanishad is dealing with this Brahma Vidya and treating one of the aspects of the Brahma Vidya in a different way. Every Upanishad has a particular key to open one particular door of the Brahma Vidya. That is why so many Upanishads, every Upanishad dealing with Brahma Vidya, every Upanishad has something new to contribute to it. Every Upanishad opens a new door to this Brahma Vidya because the approach is different. The content is the central, apart from the central content, how it approaches the central content or which aspect of the Brahma Vidya. So, this is where lies the significance of each Upanishad. So, as we know, as we have heard, as we have seen in most of the Upanishads, even though each Upanishad is approaching that supreme knowledge of the Brahman in its own way and making us aware of our own limitations and showing us the path how to reach, how to attain to that supreme knowledge, yet we find in all the Upanishads that description of the supreme reality towards which all our knowledge, all our activities, all our conscious approach has to be directed. And that every rishi, every Upanishad, every sacred text, it confirms again and again that it is not possible to arrive at this higher knowledge by our normal efforts. We cannot say that very sincerely, very regularly, with all punctuality, I continue doing my work, and this is how I will realize the Brahman. I will arrive at that higher knowledge. No, this will not be possible. Mere punctuality, regularity, and little bit of sincerity in our work, with all these normal efforts or simple efforts, we cannot arrive at that knowledge. It needs some kind of special process, and this special process as long as we are confined to our outer consciousness, as long as we are living in our external self, which is basically the egocentric self, where division, duality, all kinds of narrowness which prevail. So till in that consciousness, in that state of being, our mind is not accustomed with that special process through which the higher knowledge can be attained. So therefore, we have all our teachers, all our guides, all our, all those who are adept in that knowledge. That is why the Kathopanishad says, Prapya Varan Nibodhata. Get up, arise and awake. Uttishtata Jagrata. This is the process. Process means Uttishtata, get up. Get up from what? Get up from the state of being that you are in. Because in the ordinary consciousness, we all are in a sleeping mode, in our dormant consciousness. We are not aware of many things. We are not aware of even very, very simple things which keep happening within and around us. In that state of dormant, that state of, tamas, where we are almost sleeping, we are completely unaware of many things that is happening within and what lies outside of us. So from that state, the commandment here is that get up, arise, and awake. Merely opening the eyes doesn't refer to awakening. One's eyes can be wide open, yet one doesn't see properly. One doesn't see. So that is why the Gita says, Yah pashyati sapashyati. One who knows how to see, and one knows, he knows or he sees. So it is not through the physical eyes that we can see the truth. It is through the eye of that awareness, it is through the eye, that inner vision, that one can see what lies deep within. So when it says arise, so it refers to that arising from the mode in which we are operating in our normal life, which is tamasic mode, very lethargic, very mechanical. So from that, we must awake, arise, and awake to ourselves. There must be this self awakening. We must start asking these questions to ourselves. And it is only in that awakening, only when we have raised ourselves, we have we are in that mode of awakening, then in that state, these questions are normal. That who am I? What is the purpose of mine in this world? Why am I brought here? What should I do? How should I do? How should I live my life rightly? How should I face all the challenges of life, small or big, with the right attitude? How do I develop all the divine qualities, the soul qualities, all that is needed? How do I manifest those in me so then I can arrive at that higher knowledge and then I can have that eternal peace and eternal happiness? All these questions do not come as long as we are in the ordinary level. So when we arise, when we awake to ourselves, in that state, these questions are normal. And when these questions arise, who should answer to these questions? And the Upanishad says, Prapya Varana Nibodhata. Go and see a guru, a teacher, a guide, someone who is adept in this knowledge, someone who has realized this, someone who is a shrestha, who is a master, go and approach him, nibodhata, and understand from him. But then, where to find that guru? Where should I run? Here, there also, the guidance comes from the Shastras, the guidance comes from the masters and the gurus, the realized souls, that if one has that sincerity within oneself, if one has that intensity in the aspiration, the guru finds out that disciple, or one finds one's own guru without making any effort towards it. The guru appears in various forms or in a particular form, and only the man who is awakened to himself can understand that, oh, this is my guru. It may not be a physical guru, it may not be an educated living guru, it may be a book, it may be some sound, it may be something of the nature, it may be something, it may be a man, it may be one's own relatives. So the guru can appear in any form and in any manner. Only the awakened man knows, only one who carries that sense, that intensity in the aspiration can identify, can recognize, yes, I have found my guru. Even finding a place resonating with that, one feels that, oh, this place is my guru. Because in that place, there is so much of vibration, so much of positivity, that environment itself is enough for the man's growth, for answering to every question of that awakened man. So by guru, it doesn't mean that like there has to be some spiritual teacher who is sitting, who is giant, who has many followers, and then who has this personality, that personality. That may be, that is also one form of the guru. But the guru is not confined to one form. He is swayam gurur brahma, gurur vishnu, gurur devo maheshwara, guru sakshat parabrahma, tasmai shri gurave namah. That he is the supreme. He may be ordinary man. Very ordinary man can be the guru, but it is the divine principles which are operative in a guru. A guru never acts in a human way. He goes through all the experiences of the human, behaves like a very ordinary human, but inwardly, all his activities, all his operations are through the divine principles, because he himself is the divine. So, what is expected every one of us from every one of us is that openness, that intensity in the aspiration, that yes, we want, that awakening to ourselves, then things will be worked out. So, towards this, the Upanishads keep us reminding that there is a higher knowledge. There is a higher knowledge towards which we have to move and we have to arrive at. And only by arriving at that higher knowledge, that rest of the things can be understood, or all can be understood. And this knowledge was in possession with, when we talk about the gurus, when we talk about who possessed this kind of knowledge. So this is where the Upanishad, the Mundaka Upanishad opens and then says, it mentions about in the initial verses that there are these rishis, these gods, these deities who had or these realized souls who had this knowledge, who possessed this knowledge. And then it says, Brahma Devanam Prathamah Sambabhuva Vishwasya Karta Bhuvanasya Gupta Sa Brahma Vidyam Sarva Vidya Pratishtham Atharvaya Jishtaputraya Praha. So he says that it was Brahma, the first of the gods. He was born, the most awakened, the completely awakened. So a spirit borns out of the Supreme Spirit through which the creation takes place. And he is considered then as the creator of all. And one who is the creator of the all is also the protector of all, the protector of the world. So therefore, he says, Bhuvanasya Gopta. He is Bhuvanasya Srashta and the Bhuvanasya Gopta. So he is the protector, he is the creator, and he is the protector. And he cannot keep that knowledge secret within him, because that is not the purpose that the knowledge has to be kept secret. It has to be given for its expansion, for its actualization. So then it helps, that knowledge helps the deeper awakening in others. So he passes it on to his son, his eldest son, Atharva. So he says, Atharvane, Jeshta Putraya, Atharva. That God knowledge, that Brahma Vidya, he declares to his eldest son, Atharva. And this is what we see very boldly declared in the beginning of this Upanishad, which is the foundational base of all other knowledge, this Brahma Vidya, this God knowledge. And it is by knowing that Brahman, it is by entering into that Brahma Vidya, that secret chamber of the Brahman, Brahma Vidya, that one can understand the final mystery behind all. Till then, everything looks like mysterious. How do we demystify? How do we go behind all the mystery of all forms and names, including all objects, elements, everything else that we perceive, everything else that we grasp through our senses or we experience in the world through our outer or external senses. So we have to know that. This is made clear that we have to know that supreme knowledge. We have to arrive at that supreme knowledge. And Atharvan, as it is a natural, as it is very, very natural to all the gurus, he also didn't keep this knowledge for his own purpose. He didn't keep it secret with him. He also transmitted that knowledge, and transmitted to whom? Transmitted for what purpose? Transmitted so then the others also can arrive at that knowledge, and they also get into that knowledge and then pass it on to others. So this is how that knowledge comes down from the Supreme Himself to all those who need, all those who aspire for. So then it says, Atharvana, Yam Pravadet Brahma Atharva Tam Purovacha Angire Brahma Vidya. स भारद्वाजाय सत्यवाहाय प्राह भारद्वाजो अंगिरसे paravara. So this knowledge, what was given by Brahma to Atharva, so Atharvan declared it to Angira, and Angira declared it to Satyavaha, and then it was passed on to Bharadwaja, and then Bharadwaja to Angirasa. And what is this Vidya? So this Vidya is a complete Vidya. So that is why it says Paravaram. Param Avaram. This knowledge includes both the higher and the lower knowledge. Higher knowledge is then called the higher knowledge, where the lower knowledge is also reconciled into that or brought into that for its own transformation. Or the higher knowledge enters into the realm of the lower and transforms it, uplifts it. So Paravaram. And then Shaunaka. Then it says that Shaunaka, Shaunaka vai Mahasalu Angirasam, Vidhivadupasannah Papracha, Kasminnu Bhagavu Vijñate, Sarvamidam Vijñatam Bhavati. So now look at that. It says to that Angiras, Shaunaka approaches. Shaunaka uh, is the disciple here. He approaches Angiras, and then how he approaches in the due way, Vidhivat. That Vidhivat in the form of a disciple. The Guru will not answer to the disciple if the disciple doesn't have all the qualities of a disciple, if he has not disciplined himself thoroughly. So it is to that completely disciplined, sincere, pure disciple the knowledge is transmitted. He then becomes the Yogya, the perfectly eligible Shishya. So then he can hold that knowledge, he can possess that knowledge, and he can not only possess that knowledge, he can make use of that knowledge. Not only he can just make use of the knowledge, possess and make use of the knowledge, he can also transmit, he can have the power of transmitting the same knowledge to the others. So before this knowledge was passed on to Shaunaka, so it is the Angirasa to whom Shaunaka approaches and then asks him, Kasminnu khalu bhagavu vijñate sarvamidam vijñatam bhavati. So tell me, knowing which all can be known. So please declare to that knowledge which you are in possession. So please speak to that. And to him he speaks. What he says? Tasmai sah hovacha dve vidye veditavye द्वे विद्ये वेदितव्ये इति हस्मा यद ब्रह्म विदो वदन्ति parachaiva aparacha. He says only two are the knowledge. This twofold knowledge that has to be known. And every knowers of the Brahman can tell about it and tell about it that this twofold knowledge is the higher and the lower knowledge. Para and apara. This is what is the central content or the main content of the first part, first chapter of Mundaka Upanishad, which we are concentrating today. That the declaration here is the question, the big time question that a disciple look the quality and the content of the question that kasminnu khalu bhagavo vijñate sarvamidam vijñatam bhavate. So tell us that knowing which all can be known. You give us that key because when a disciple asks all these questions, he is already well versed. He knows many shastras. He is in possession with many vidyas. Even then, he doesn't understand. Even then, he keeps committing mistakes. Even then, he finds himself in the confinement of many things. Even then, he feels that narrowness, that limitation. So the question springs naturally from his heart. I have studied so much. And this has been the story with all great people. Look at Vasishta Ganapati Muni with all his deep knowledge. This is not something of 5,000 years old or 10,000 years old or 25,000 years old. This is just the recent story, maybe a century back or a little 150 years back. So Ganapati Muni, with all his knowledge, knowing all the Vedas thoroughly, not intellectually, because they were tapasvis, knowing all the Upanishads, all the Dharma Shastras, being himself a poet of very high order, when he meets Ramana, whom he calls Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi. So when he meets this Brahmana Swami, so he surrenders himself. He says, teach me, because I have done enough tapasya. I have done all the shastras. But I know what you have, I don't have in me. And I know that what you know is the right knowledge. And that right knowledge can create that foundation in me by which I can experience that peace, I can experience that happiness, I can experience that delight. So that's how he becomes the first and foremost disciple of Ramana. Look at Kapali Shastri himself. What not they studied. He himself was initiated to Sri Vidya tradition by none other than Ganapati Muni himself. How do we find? I mean, Ganapati Muni himself was his teacher, his guru, his initiator. They were studying directly from him, all the Shastras. So thorough, so much of command over the language, so much of command, clarity on the subject matter. Then they give up everything and then come to Sri Aurobindo and then say, teach us that, because all this knowledge what we have acquired, to the outer person, to the normal people, it may seem that, oh, he is such a great man, he is such a knowledgeable man. But that knowledgeable man knows that he knows nothing, that he needs to take refuge in, take refuge in that guru who is in possession with that knowledge. So they all come and then sit and then learn from Sri Aurobindo what is that knowledge. So that has been our tradition. So this is how Shaunaka, it is not just any ordinary disciple going and asking a teacher. Shaunaka himself must be having certain realizations in him. Otherwise, the higher knowledge is not transmitted to any ordinary soul, any ordinary disciple. So, a disciple of very high order goes to a teacher of very high order and then asks this question. And then to him, he explains that look, every Brahmavadis, every Brahma knowers knows and have spoken of this twofold knowledge. This twofold knowledge, which is worth of our efforts, para and apara, the higher knowledge and the lower knowledge. When we look at these verses and the verses which are coming after, we will find out that maybe a fine line has been drawn to distinguish between the subjects that we study under these two forms of knowledge. It may appear initially, but it has a deeper message. We seem to know that there is a God knowledge, there is this Brahma Vidya or the science of Brahman, which is related to the means and processes through which we arrive at the full knowledge of the ultimate reality. But when we contemplate more, it is not merely speaking of the distinction, it is not merely distinguishing the subject matter of this twofold knowledge, but it is, in a sense, directing us towards the methods and processes by which this knowledge, this knowledge of the supreme reality, ultimate reality, can be arrived at. So, in a very normal way, very usual way, we know about the world. We know many things that is there in the world, but that is not the world knowledge. How much of information, because Brahma Vidya is not just the knowledge of the Brahman, it is also the knowledge of the world, it is also the knowledge of the self. But what is that world knowledge? That supreme knowledge is the knowledge about the supreme reality, the ultimate reality, which is the source of everything, the ultimate reality from which everything comes. And what is the world knowledge? The world knowledge is not how much knowledge, information we have about the world. Someone asks about the total geography of it or the different continents and everything about that we know. So when someone is well informed about the world, is not having the world knowledge. It is not in that sense that the word world knowledge, a Jagat Jnanam, is given. So the world knowledge in the context of Brahma Vidya means knowing the world through Brahman, through the lens of Brahman. That means seeing the presence of the same Brahman, how he is operating in everything being and happening. It is through that lens that one has to understand the world. The same way, through the lens of oneself, that one looks at oneself, looks at one's own external being. So then it becomes the self knowledge. As we find in the Gita, Uddhared Atmanatmanam. By the Atman, see the Atman. By the real Atman which is within, which is free from all kinds of stains, all kinds of veils, rather veiled by the outer consciousness, the outer instruments. So it is through the lens of that, when it sees, when the mind looks at itself through the lens of the self, it knows not only its limitations, it knows all its potentiality also. The same applies to the physical, the same applies to the mental, that how they should look at themselves through the lens of the self. Then it becomes the self knowledge. But to know this, the first requisite that we had mentioned, that one has to have that intensity in the aspiration, and that intensity of the aspiration joins the person with the guru, and then the guru guides. The guru can come in the form of a shastra also, the guru can come in any form, but there we are led by the guru to study all this. We are led, like today we are sitting here, we all are in different places, but somewhere we all are connected inwardly into one world. And we are discussing about that Supreme Brahman. We're trying to study what these Upanishads have given to us. We're trying to find out how do we understand this Brahma Vidya by studying these Upanishads. We must study the Upanishads. But studying merely the Upanishads is not the Paravidya. It is still the Aparavidya. That is why the next verse will say what is Para and what is Apara. So Aparavidya, even it puts the original mantra says Tatra Apara Rigvedo Yajurveda Samaveda Atharvaveda Shiksha Kalpa Vyakaranam Niruktam Chanda Jyotishamiti. So we study all the Vedas, all the Vedangas, we study the Upanishads, Aranyakas, the Samhitas, the Brahmanas, the Upangas, all the six Vedangas, which are helpful in understanding the Vedas, the grammar, the etymology, the prosody, astronomy, all these things we study. And all these, he says, still belong to the lower knowledge, the Aparavidya. By studying, by acquiring the complete knowledge of all this, one will not be considered as the knower of all because they are limited. And tatra para atha para yaya tad aksharam adhigamyate. He says that para is what? If all these Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda, all these are Aparavidya. Should we study these or not? Yes, we must study. Even in that context, with the devotees and followers of Sri Aurobindo, even Savitri, Life Divine, Synthesis, all those will fall into the Aparavidya because they are mere guides or even supreme guides, but instruments, tools. When by going through these are necessary tools, very high tools, very significant and important tools to arrive at that higher knowledge. They themselves are not the higher knowledge. They direct towards, they show us the path. That is why Sri Aurobindo says that one can read while speaking about the Shastra, he says that one can read, one can go through all the Shastras, but the real Shastra is within oneself. All the outer Shastras, they direct towards that. They show us the path. They show us what are the challenges on the path, how to face the challenges on the path. It is said that when one arrives at that supreme knowledge within oneself, experiences that supreme immutable tad aksharam adhigamyate, was in possession of that akshara, sees to it, listens to it, feels it, and every moment is in possession of it, directs oneself, gets directed by itself for everything and being. His entire life is regulated by that knowledge. So that is the supreme knowledge. And this deeper sense is made again and again clear to us throughout many verses of the Upanishads. And it moves forward and then shows the relationship between these two forms of knowledge. And What is the original verse that it says? It says, it describes that higher knowledge. It describes that supreme reality, that supreme reality, that ultimate reality, that source of everything is throughout the Upanishads. Wherever there is a little description of that, it says he is unseizable, is unthinkable, without any connection, without any color, without eyes and ears, and it has no hands, no feet. It is eternal, it is pervading, which is there in all things and beings, which is impalpable, which is imperishable, and that which is the source of all creations. And the seers and sages who have experienced and realized that they see him everywhere. So that is where the original verse, yet tat adreshyam, cannot be seen, it is invisible, like adrishyam. Agrahyam, no one can grasp it. Is it beyond the grasp of everyone? Avarnam, like we did the uh, somewhere else, it is that yah ekah avarna bahudha shakti yoga varnan anekan dadhati. So himself is avarna, without any color, without any hue, because it's pure. Achakshu, it has no eyes. Achakshu shrotram, that is also ashrotra, that has no eyes, no ears. Tad apani padam has no hands and no feet. And we see a symbol of that when we go to the temple of Jagannath, that we see without hand apani padam, no hands, no feet. But everyone comes to its refuge that he can give. He walks to everyone's home. He extends his helping hand to all, but himself has no hands, no feet, has no ears. Eyes are big, so he sees, but he sees not just one, sees the entire world in his eyes, holds the entire creation in his vision. He is eternal, all pervading. He says, Nityam Vibhum Sarvagatam, has entered into everything, Sarvagatam. Susukshmam, and very subtle, Susukshmam. Tadavyayam, and it is imperishable, Avyayam. Yad Bhuta Yonim, Bhuta Yoni, it is the source, it is the womb of all the creatures. Paripashyanti Dhira. Dhira, the steady ones, all those who are settled in their knowledge, in that higher knowledge. Those says Paripashyanti. They see him everywhere. They behold him everywhere, being present in everywhere. And how can our finite means, our limited mortal mind, narrow mind, and how can all our senses, which are limited by their own limitations, can perceive that which itself is limitless, which itself is all pervading, which itself is eternal, which itself is imperishable, which itself transcends all, yet it is the secret source of all things. It is that source from which everything comes. Because it is all powerful, it can hold everything within itself. And release everything from within itself. That is where the next verse in the first chapter of Mundaka Upanishad leads us and then explains that the process by which mutable and then finite creation comes into the manifestation, how it happens from that immutable infinite, how this mortal finite existence, this world comes from the immutable infinite, that limitless, that eternal, that all pervading. How does it come? What is the process? So here it gives two bright examples, very significant images. He says, to this question it answers, like where from this Brahman gets the substance of creation? Because if anyone wants to create something, an artist wants to create something, a sculptor wants to create something, an architect wants to create something, a poet wants to create something, he needs to have the substance for its creation. He needs to have all the tools, processes, the substance. So where from he gets that substance? And in the material world, we know like where the tools and all these things are needed, are there from where we can get it. But that supreme infinite Brahman, where from it gets its substance for the creation? Now, towards this question, the Upanishad answers that it brings out the substance from itself, out of itself, and gives this image that as a spider brings out the web from within itself and gathers it back into itself. I don't know whether such spider truly exists or they are extinct. Because whenever I have presented this, there are some people who have studied spiders and then say that no, it doesn't happen that way. Maybe like some species which were capable of bringing that web out of themselves. Bringing out from itself is fine, but taking it back into oneself, though physically that web itself doesn't enter into it, but at least the substance they suck into themselves and then again bring it out whenever there is the need. Yathurna nabhi srujate gridhnate cha. What a beautiful image. Yatha urna nabhi creates urna nabha. Urna means those fibers, the sticky fibers which by which the spider weaves its web. So that is urna. So it carries in its navel. So that is why urna nabha. It is there in its nabhi. It is there in its within itself. So he says, so also this Brahman, this supreme reality, this ultimate reality, this supreme Brahman, this unchanging eternal reality, it brings out of itself this entire world that we see. This entire world, whatever is there, is perceived through our senses. And then everything goes back to itself. Now, everything goes back to itself also has a can have two different meanings. So, one meaning usually which is understood that because he is all powerful, he can destroy its own creation and then take it back to itself. That is the usual meaning many people have. Can be true. Yes, he is all powerful. He can destroy his own creation. If that is also another principle of new creation, For bringing out a new creation, the old has to be destroyed. For bringing something new, the old patterns, that old way of thinking, the old patterns of thinking, old fashion of being, everything old has to be destroyed for bringing the new. And if this happens at a human level, just imagine what could be happening at a divine level, at a supreme level. He is all powerful, that is true. But drawing back to itself also means that there is a natural tendency, there is something which is natural, there is something which is central to every conscious being, that because he, that immutable, that infinite, that supreme, that all powerful is present within every one of us, and we do not realize it because of our engagement with the outer self of ours. There is this natural aspiration in all beings towards expanding, towards achieving that power, towards becoming one with that. So it is there, the power of the Supreme Self itself is forcing us, creating that urge in every one of us to attain to that unity of consciousness which is lost at the gross level. So it is referring to that evolutionary journey, that evolutionary process, that by following the discipline, by contemplating on that immutable, by becoming and growing more and more conscious of that supreme which is present within ourselves, we must become free from this bondage which is binding us to realize that, and then merge into that. This merging into the Brahman, in the totality of that, when that happens, so it is as if the Supreme itself is drawing into itself its own creation. How beautiful. So, this is the sense which is conveyed in this. And the original verse says, Yathurna nabhi srujate grinnate cha. Yatha pruthivyam oshadhayah sambhavanti. And it says that as in the on the earth, Oshadhaya Sambhavanti, all the trees, plants, and everything that emerges naturally. So, the same way, in a natural, by following a certain mechanism, so very spontaneously, the Brahman brings out this creation and expands itself. He has woven himself around this, you know, this creation. And at the same time, the Brahman, that supreme Brahman, after creating its own creation, after expanding itself to become this creation, also has covered itself, has put a veil, and it is not some, like ordinary kind of bondage or net around himself that he has put, but it is another second reality of itself, the mechanism of Maya, that Paraprakriti, that supreme Maya. The Maya itself is the Maya of the divine reality itself. He creates this mechanism of Maya, this veil, for the purpose of the creation. It is he who has spun the veil around his face by his own power, and that power is Maya. He himself is the veil. He himself is the reality within and behind it. So, therefore, it says that the creation comes from the creator itself, and then creation must go back to the creator itself. And for this, whatever mechanism he has created by which he has hidden himself from others to know himself, so therefore it is not easy to get into that supreme knowledge. It is not easy to get into that supreme knowledge. This is where the next verse, number 8, he it refers to that we need to make effort, because the Brahman itself is growing its own energy at work. Then from him this matter is born. Then because of him, because this energy of the Brahman is growing in its own work, so in the matter, the life and mind and the truth and all other worlds and the works of immortality is possible because he himself is the present, he himself is active in that. So the original verse says, tapasa chiyate brahma, tatah annam abhijayate, annat prano manah satyam lokah karmasu chamratam. He said, tapasa, by the tapas, by energizing, by you know allowing himself to grow by his own energy at work, so he creates the anna, the matter. It is from him. Because of that tapas, the matter comes, and because he is present in the matter, so life and mind and truth and light and immortality is possible in the matter. So that's what we see, that he extends himself into the space and time. He becomes the matter. He, as the condition for his own manifestation, and packs it with all his energy of being. And it is because of this presence, because he is present, omnipresent, because he is present in everything that has manifest in this world, because especially he is present in the matter, that life and mind, they begin to emerge out of it. If the presence of that supreme reality was not there in the Brahma matter, if matter was not the extension of the supreme, the emergence of mind and life or consciousness would not have been possible. It is possible because it is there. So therefore, like the another name by which the Agni is called, or the supreme reality also called by that name, are Jata Vedas. From the level of inconscience to the superconscious, Agni, he is present in the form of Agni. That is where he works out in the inconscience its own liberation, freedom from the inconscience, from that state of tamas and darkness to the world of light. And it is because it is that Brahman that is involved in the matter that will eventually bring out the truth, that will harmonize all the different worlds and their actions on the matter. And then we have the last verse, which यह सर्वज्ञः सर्वविद् यस्य ज्ञानमयं तपः तस्मात् एतद् ब्रह्म नाम रूपमन्नं च जायते. So the forms and names, they change, but that energy at work in the creation, It is ever unchanging. It is always eternal. It doesn't change. So that is why we find always the mention of that Nitya. It doesn't die. It is eternal. It is ever at work. Tapas. So tapasa chiyate Brahma. The Brahman grows by tapas. Tapas is that working out of that energy. It is ever at work in bringing out all the deeper possibilities of life and mind and the truth which is hidden behind everything. As long as we are tied to form and name, to this external, limited, narrow, we keep experiencing the death. We keep experiencing all kinds of limitations and narrowness. But the moment we step back, the moment we discover that one consciousness force, that Eka, that Akhanda, that Kevala, which has built all these worlds, which is ever present, which is ever at work in the creation of us, then we can discover that principle of immortality within us. Then it becomes possible that we can immortalizing ourselves or every aspect of our being means experiencing that bliss, that felicity, that rapture, that ananda, that immortality, that soma, that amrita, that ananda within oneself. So this is where the first part of Mundaka Upanishad it ends, and once again we see this synthesis of the Brahman, the Maya, of the eternal unchanging reality and the ever changing appearances. All these are brought into that state, by referring to that state where one can have that, one can possess that higher knowledge. This para, apara, again, are not two different things, but two different voices of the one truth. The state of mortality and the state of immortality, they are not two different separate worlds, separate things, but it is the two different poise, two different, uh, you know, sittings of the same eternal Brahman. They all have to be reconciled within oneself, step by step, by following the path of the discipline. By following this process, the method which has been given to us, we need to synthesize, reconcile that higher knowledge within ourselves, but passing through the lower knowledge. The lower knowledge, the apara is not something which is mentioned here because it is upright, because it is lower, it has to be rejected, and only the para has to be accepted. That has not been the process. That is not the intention of the seers and sages. That is why the Ishopanishad very strongly mentions that na vidya na avidya. It is avidyaya mrutyum tirtva vidyaya amrutamashte. So, Mrityum Tirtva, this transcending the Mrityu, the state of mortality, through the avidya, through the lower knowledge, through the knowledge of the division, knowledge of duality and binaries. Vidyaya Amrutam Ashnute, when one reconciles that, brings everything into that one state of consciousness, that state of unity. So, therefore, Vidya is that which is attained through avidya, and vidya is the unity of consciousness, and avidya is the knowledge of the multiplicity. Vidya is the knowledge of the unity of the consciousness. So it is by reconciling that, by bringing a synthetic, uh, you know, uh, realization of the Vidya and Avidya, that one can be in possession of the higher knowledge. The higher knowledge can be attained to. So this is what is the subject matter of the first part of Mundaka Upanishad. So in our successive classes, we can take up the further sections and complete the Upanishad as a part of our study circle, as a part of our Swadhyay. Thank you. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, Sampath Bhai. Dhanyavada. Was a very, it is a very subtle topic, and thank you for sharing so many wonderful insights. When you were sharing about para and apara vidya is not separate but two poises of consciousness, I was reminded of when Sri Aurobindo says that it is not the action but the consciousness with which we do the action makes it yogic or non-yogic. So yeah, very beautiful nuances, and would have loved to take some questions, but I think our time is up. But what we could do is, since we have shared the website address upanishads.org.in, where the entire text of the Upanishad is there, so maybe those who are interested to dive deeper can go through it, and then we can email you our question so that the next session you could cover some of
I will
these.
address few questions in the next session first before we take up the second chapter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Thank
Dhanyavad.
you.
To all
Dhanyawada.
of you.
Maybe for a minute, I'll just
Yes.
turn the camera around and show everyone who's there in this room.
Oh, okay.
So that, in the-
Okay. All right. Namaste.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all
Thank
also
you.
who have joined online. Thank you very much. Dhanyawada.